I see that an oddly specific special interest has once again brought you to my door. You seek to understand the history, nay, the art of Renaissance armor. You seek the power of the sources, but perhaps you know not where to start. Who can you trust with your curiosity? Where should you go to continue your quest, such that you, too, may be granted the power to argue with other nerds in niche Facebook groups? Well, adventurer, shall I open the gate? Pull back the curtain. Let us begin. Ambiguity is your constant companion in any study of history. While we must do our best to draw supportable conclusions from the body of evidence, we also just have to accept that there's a lot we may never know for certain. When it comes to the study of armor, there are three types of primary sources available to us: extant artifacts, written texts, and period artwork. Each offers valuable insights, but each is an incomplete source of knowledge alone. Whenever possible, it is best to combine observations across these pillars to offer answers that are most likely to approach the truth. So let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of each type of source in order to understand how we might mitigate bias and temper certainty in our conclusions. Naturally, looking at authentic, surviving examples of armor is the best way to understand it. Except those two words, authentic and surviving, are where the problem lies. To what extent can we trust that the current state of an object reflects its original nature? And to what extent can we trust that the object is a representative example of its kind? First of all, fewer and fewer originals survive the further back you look in time. We have so many beautifully preserved armors from the 16th and 17th century, for example, but that number dwindles as you push back into the 15th century and earlier. When you only have a handful of pieces to study, any conclusions you might draw from that tiny sample are bound to be extrapolation. We also have to consider survivorship bias. What forces might have led these pieces to last the test of time over others? When it comes to armor, most museum collections are largely composed of high-end artifacts made for the wealthy and powerful. Their beauty and craftsmanship, as well as the status of their owners, made these pieces quote-unquote worth preserving. So we have to keep in mind that our catalog of extant examples has a strong class bias. Further, even carefully preserved artifacts can be warped by the effects of time, through literal physical decay perhaps, but also potentially through misguided modern intervention. For example, many of our surviving armors were stripped of their original finishes to suit the taste of 20th century collectors. Looking at you, Hearst. Or have been subject to somewhat dodgy restoration in their lifetimes. Please do not treat reenactor kit as extant armor. While there are some truly amazing armors and really accurate reproductions these days, it's still not the same as looking at an original object. And unless you have really trained your eye for detail, you will be teaching yourself to accept modern interpretations rather than original shapes. Which brings us to our second primary source of information, primary texts. These can include muster rolls, household inventories, accounts of tournaments or battles, and so on. While we can glean fascinating details about the prevalence, cost, effectiveness, or type of armor from these sources, they can be somewhat limited when applied to the visual study of armor. Detailed written descriptions can be rare, and even so, it is difficult to confidently reconstruct how something looked from words alone. So our third and final way of studying armor is through artworks of the period, including paintings, manuscript miniatures, altarpieces, effigies, and frescoes. It is easy to dismiss art as uselessly fallible, subject to artistic license, exaggeration, or simply skill issues in accurate rendering. But in a time before photography, art could be a form of journalism and factual documentation. We cannot dismiss its value out of hand, especially when art is shown to be quite faithful to the original object. I mean, look at the realism here. Maybe 15th century artists couldn't paint cows, but they sure did understand how to capture that exact kind of thigh chub you get when you wear a pair of jeans that's just a bit too tight. While we don't always have an original object to compare against, we can protect our analysis from misinterpretation by familiarizing ourselves with artistic conventions, myths, and allegories of the period of study. When you try to think with a medieval mind, you can start to see with a medieval eye for what features would, to them, have been clearly fantasy, given the context of the subject or the style of the depiction. And even when we do have a high-quality original object to study, art gives us additional context, like what would have been worn with the armor? How was the armor styled? How did it live and breathe on the battlefield and in daily life? Every additional source gives us another layer of understanding. Well, we group our collection of sources by location and time, then try to observe patterns within that data set. The more data points or unique sources you have to analyze, the better to shape a representative sample. Now, if you wanted to be really rigorous about it, you could quantitatively evaluate how many portrayals out of your total sample reflect a certain feature, and then compare those percentages.
I'm holding out for a hero, someone brave and true, a guiding star in the night to lead us through.
Before I go, I thought I would leave you with a list of resources that will be really useful as you continue your research into armor. I will say seeing the real objects in person remains one of the best ways to get to know armor, so if you can, you should try to get to a museum. Now, this list is not at all comprehensive of every museum in the world that has armor. However, these represent some of the most robust collections. Many of these museums are kind of a direct descendant of the royal armory of their respective country, so you can expect to see very fine armors of that particular culture represented. If you're particularly interested in quote-unquote normal people armor, the Styrian Armory in Austria is extremely well known for its large collection of munitions grade and mass-produced armors. Also, the Worcester Art Museum, which is the new home of the Higgins Armory collection, is opening their redesigned and newly renovated arms and armor galleries this fall, so you should totally check it out. I am so excited. But if you can't get out to a museum, there are plenty of ways to still learn about armor from the comfort of your own home. Shall we talk about books? There are a few really great primers on European arms and armor that I can recommend. First might be Arms and Armor of the Medieval Knight by David Edge, or European Armor circa 1066 to circa 1700 by Claude Blair. I believe this is getting a new edition sometime soon, asterisk. So expect the information to be updated in a few years. How to Read European Armor by Donald Luraca is also a great resource and has beautiful photography. The Royal Armories also has these little bite-sized books on almost every armor topic under the sun. So if you want a really brief introduction to a wide variety of styles, this is also a great way in. An honorable mention to Medieval Craftsmen Armorers by Matthias Pfaffenbichler. This book has a lot of really interesting insights into things like the cost of armor or the guild structure. So if you're interested in armor not only from an aesthetic standpoint, but from more of a sociological one, this is a great place to start. And of course, easiest research vehicle there is the internet. If you can't get to a museum, try the online collection database of any of the museums I named earlier. A lot of them have really great online collections where you can browse almost all of their objects in really high fidelity photography. Now, if you're not a Pinterest person, I fear that Pinterest is an amazing resource for armor research. A couple of folks in the armor community have created these really magnificently curated boards, broken down by century, culture, feature. So if you don't want to start from ground zero, take advantage of the work that other folks have already done. There are also websites like Manuscript Miniatures and Armor in Art that are online databases of a bunch of artistic depictions of armor. Unfortunately, they haven't been super updated in the past couple years, so the content is a little stagnant, but again, it is a great foundation for your research. Honorable mention to Armor Archive, though I will admit I haven't used it that much myself, and it is very focused on people who make armor specifically, but there's a lot of really great posts on there that you will learn a lot from. Also, I will say that if you can still stomach Facebook, the 15th Century Armor group is a wealth of knowledge. Some folks in there have been making armor and studying armor for literal decades and are absolute treasure troves. Not always, but sometimes it can get a little gatekeepy because nerds do be like that. So before you ask the most newbie of questions, I would first use the search bar to glean what you can, because otherwise you might get a lot of people being like, look it up. But at the end of the day, other people are your greatest resource for learning. So be kind and curious and genuinely grateful for people's time, and they will usually be pretty happy to help you. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I make content about art, history, with a particular focus on armor, and I make clothes that look like armor. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, I hope you'll stick around, like, and subscribe. Until next time, stay shiny.
Holding out for a hero, someone brave and true, a guiding star in the night to lead us through.